In this moment, as the light of day surrenders to gentle darkness, you have found your way to the sacred space known as the Night Rain Sanctuary. This is not merely a location, but a state of being, where the soft patter of evening rain merges with the ancient whispers of earth and sky. Allow your mind to release, like the gentle night rain falling naturally without force or resistance. Within this silence, sacred stories will gradually wash away the burdens of the day that has passed. Each worry, each tension, each restless thought. We need not do anything at all, only be present as the night rain is present with the earth. This sanctuary exists beyond time, where the distinction between past and future dissolves like morning mist. Here there is only now, this eternal moment where your breath harmonizes with the rhythm of the universe. These ancient legends are not for entertainment, but doorways that guide your soul back to its original pristine nature. As you listen, let each word be like a raindrop, soaking deep into consciousness. No need to grasp, no need to analyze. Allow them to flow naturally through you, carrying away whatever no longer serves your spiritual journey. In this quietude, we begin the journey home. Home to yourself, home to the deep peace that always exists within each of us, waiting only to be recognized. The rain knows no hurry. The earth knows no anxiety. In their timeless dance, we remember our own natural rhythm of being. Here in the sanctuary of this moment, let the weight of becoming dissolve into the lightness of simply being. Breathe deeply. Release completely. The journey begins here. The lantern in the rain. The night had fallen heavy and thick like a velvet curtain drawn across the world. Clouds swollen with rain pressed low against the ancient hills, their bellies glowing faintly with the memory of a sun long set. In the heart of this storm, a narrow path wound its way through the forest slick with water and scattered with fallen leaves. Along this path, a solitary figure trudged, cloak pulled tight against the wind. Her name was Mira, and she had been walking for hours, her boots soaked through her breath, visible in the chill. The forest was alive with the music of rain, the steady drumming on leaves, the soft rush of water down mossy stones, the distant rumble of thunder. Each sound seemed to echo in Mira's chest, mingling with the anxious thoughts that had driven her from her village and into the wild. She had left behind a world of noise and expectation, a place where every day felt like a test she was destined to fail. The pressure to be perfect, to please everyone, to never show weakness, had built up within her like a storm. Tonight, unable to bear it any longer, she had slipped away, following the old stories her grandmother used to tell about a sanctuary hidden deep in the woods. A place where worries could be washed away, where peace waited like a gentle hand on the shoulder. As the rain intensified, Mira's resolve began to waver. Her legs ached, her stomach rumbled, and the darkness pressed in on all sides. She stumbled on a root, nearly falling, and caught herself against a tree. For a moment, she considered turning back, but then, through the curtain of rain, she saw a faint glow, a warm golden light flickering between the trees. Hope flared in her chest. She pushed forward, branches whipping at her face until she emerged into a small clearing. There, nestled among ancient stones and tangled vines, stood the sanctuary. It was smaller than she had imagined, a single wooden building. Its roof bowed under the weight of centuries, its windows glowing softly. The door was carved with symbols she recognized from her grandmother's stories: a lantern, a willow tree, a bell. Mira hesitated, heart pounding, then stepped forward and knocked. The door creaked open and a gentle-faced woman appeared, her hair silver as moonlight. She smiled as if she had been expecting Mira all along. "Welcome, traveler," she said. "Come in. The rain is cold tonight." Mira stepped inside, warmth enveloping her like a blanket. The sanctuary was simple but inviting. Wooden benches lined the walls, thick rugs covered the floor, and lanterns hung from the beams, their flames dancing. The air was scented with herbs and the faint tang of rain. The woman led Mira to a bench near the hearth where a kettle steamed over the fire. She poured a cup of tea and handed it to Mira, who cradled it in trembling hands. "You look tired," the woman said kindly. "Rest here. You are safe." As Mira sipped the tea, she felt her body begin to relax. The warmth seeped into her bones, and the gentle sound of rain on the roof soothed her frayed nerves. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to let go of the tension that had become her constant companion. The woman sat beside her silent for a while. Then she spoke, her voice soft as the rain. "This sanctuary has stood for generations. Travelers come here when the world becomes too much. They bring their worries, their fears, their sorrow. And each night, as the rain falls, those burdens are washed away." Mira looked into the woman's eyes, searching for doubt, but found only kindness. "How," she whispered, "how do you make the worries go away?" The woman smiled and rose, crossing the room to a shelf lined with lanterns of every shape and size. She selected a small round lantern and returned to Mira's side. "This lantern is special," she said. "It holds the light of hope. Each night we light it together, and as the flame grows, we let our worries drift into the light. The rain outside carries them away." She handed the lantern to Mira, who felt its weight in her hands, a comforting, solid presence. "Would you like to try?" the woman asked. Mira nodded. The woman struck a match and held it to the wick. The flame caught flickering uncertainly, then growing steady and bright. The lantern cast golden patterns on the walls, and Mira felt something shift inside her, a loosening as if a knot had begun to unravel. "Close your eyes," the woman instructed gently. "Think of your worries. Picture them as small, dark clouds gathered in your chest. With each breath, imagine them drifting toward the lantern, drawn by the warmth of the flame." Mira did as she was told. She pictured her anxieties, the fear of disappointing her family, the pressure to be perfect, the loneliness that haunted her even in a crowded room. One by one, she imagined them leaving her body, floating toward the lantern, dissolving in the golden light. Outside, the rain fell harder, drumming a steady rhythm on the roof. Mira felt her breath slow, her heart steady. The weight in her chest grew lighter with each exhale. When she opened her eyes, the woman was watching her, a gentle smile on her lips. "Better?" she asked. Mira nodded, tears pricking her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. The woman squeezed her hand. "You are always welcome here. Remember, the sanctuary is not just a place, it is a way of being. Whenever the world feels heavy, close your eyes, light a lantern in your mind, and let the rain wash your worries away." Mira spent the night in the sanctuary, curled beneath a thick quilt, the lantern glowing softly beside her. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer sounded threatening. Instead, it became a lullaby, a promise that even the darkest storms would pass. As she drifted into sleep, Mira dreamed of light and rain, of burdens lifted and hearts made whole. And when she awoke, the world outside was fresh and new, the air tinged with the scent of possibility. She thanked the woman who pressed the lantern into her hands. "Take it with you," she said. "Let it remind you that peace is always within reach." Mira stepped out into the morning. The storm passed, the forest glistening with dew. She walked home with the lantern cradled against her chest, its light shining bright even in the daylight. And from that day forward, whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, Mira would close her eyes, picture the lantern's flame, and listen for the gentle music of rain. In her heart, she carried the sanctuary with her, a place of hope, of healing, and of peace. The Whispering Willow. The rain had begun at dusk, a soft drizzle that painted the world in shades of silver and blue. By nightfall, it had become a steady downpour, drumming on rooftops and soaking the earth. In the heart of the old village, where narrow lanes twisted between ancient houses, a willow tree stood beside a quiet pond. Its branches swept low, trailing their tips in the water, and its leaves whispered secrets to the wind. Under the shelter of the willow, a young girl named Lila sat with her knees pulled to her chest. She wore a faded blue dress, and her shoes were muddy from running through puddles. The world felt heavy tonight. Lila's mind was a tangle of worries, her parents' hushed arguments, the loneliness she felt at school, the fear that she would never be enough. The rain at least was honest falling, without apology, soaking everything equally. She pressed her forehead to her knees and tried to breathe slowly the way her grandmother had taught her. But the anxious thoughts kept swirling, refusing to settle. It was then, as she listened to the rain and the gentle rustle of willow leaves, that she heard it, a voice soft as a sigh. "Why do you carry so much, little one?" Lila's head snapped up. She looked around, heart pounding. There was no one in sight. The village was quiet, the windows of nearby houses glowing faintly in the rain. Only the willow stood beside her, its branches swaying. She wiped her eyes and tried to laugh at herself. "I'm just tired," she whispered. But the voice came again, gentle and kind. "You are not alone. The rain listens. The willow listens. Share your worries with us." Lila stared at the tree, half expecting it to move. She remembered her grandmother's stories, tales of spirits that lived in old trees, guardians who watched over the lost and lonely. Maybe just this once she could pretend the stories were true. She spoke softly, her words barely louder than the rain. "I'm scared. I don't know how to help my parents. I feel invisible at school. Sometimes I think I'll always feel this way." The willow's branches swayed, brushing her shoulder. The leaves shimmered, catching the lantern light from across the pond. The voice replied, "Let your worries flow with the rain. Let them drift from your heart and into the earth. The world is wide, and you are not alone in your fears." Lila closed her eyes and imagined her worries as tiny boats setting sail on the pond. Each one carried a piece of her anxiety, the arguments, the loneliness, the fear. The rain tapped a gentle rhythm, and she pictured the boats drifting farther and farther away until they were lost in the mist. The willow's voice continued, "You are stronger than you know. The rain will pass, and the sun will return. For now, let yourself rest. Trust that you are growing even when you cannot see it." Lila felt her breath slow. The ache in her chest eased, replaced by a quiet warmth. She leaned back against the willow's trunk, feeling its strength steady her. The rain became a lullaby, the willow's whispers a promise. She stayed there for a long time, listening to the night. The world was still uncertain, but she no longer felt so small within it. The willow had shared its wisdom, and the rain had carried her worries away. When Lila finally stood, the rain had softened to a gentle mist. She touched the willow's trunk in thanks, then walked home. Her steps lighter. The worries would return, she knew, but so would the rain and the willow and the gentle voice that reminded her she was never truly alone. From that night on, whenever anxiety threatened to overwhelm her, Lila would return to the willow by the pond. She would sit beneath its branches, listen to the rain, and let her worries drift away. And In the quiet, she would remember the world was wide, and she was growing even in the darkest storms. The Rainkeeper's gift. The rain had always been a companion to the village of Elderglen. It fell in gentle mists and sudden showers, in spring's renewal and autumn's sorrow. The villagers had learned to live with the rain, to welcome its blessings and endure its trials. But few knew of the Rainkeeper, the quiet guardian who watched over their dreams each night. In a small cottage at the edge of the forest, the Rainkeeper lived alone. Her name was Elowyn, and she was neither young nor old, but timeless in the way of those who belong more to legend than to reality. Her hair was the color of storm clouds, her eyes deep as rain-washed earth. Each evening, as dusk settled over Elderglen, Elowyn would light a lantern and step into the gathering mist. She carried with her a crystal jar, clear and smooth, that glowed faintly in the twilight. This jar was her gift and her burden, for within it she collected the worries of the villagers, anxieties whispered into pillows, fears hidden behind laughter, sorrows too heavy to share. The Rainkeeper's task was to gather these burdens and carry them through the night so her people could sleep in peace. Elowyn's work began as the first stars appeared. She walked the quiet lanes, pausing at each doorstep. She listened to the sighs of children, the restless tossings of parents, the silent tears of the lonely. With a gentle touch, she drew their troubles from the air, each one a tiny wisp of shadow, and placed them in her jar. The jar grew heavier with each step, but Elowyn's heart remained light. She knew that by morning the worries would be gone. As midnight approached, the rain would begin in earnest. It fell in silver sheets, drenching the fields and filling the streams. Elowyn made her way to the sanctuary at the heart of the village, a circle of ancient stones slick with moss and memory. There she set the jar upon the central stone and waited. The rain gathered around her, swirling in eddies of mist and light. The worries inside the jar shimmered, swirling like smoke. Elowyn sang a quiet song, her voice blending with the rain's rhythm. The song was older than the village itself, a melody of comfort and release. As she sang, the rain began to draw the shadows from the jar, washing them away into the earth. The worries dissolved, transformed by the cleansing power of water and song. One by one, the burdens lifted, leaving only clarity and calm behind. When the last shadow had faded, the jar glowed with a soft golden light. Elowyn smiled, her heart full. She knew that the villagers would wake to a new day, their hearts lighter, their minds at peace. Before returning home, Elowyn placed a blessing on the sanctuary. She whispered words of gratitude to the rain, to the stones, to the night itself. Then, lantern in hand, she walked back through the sleeping village, her footsteps silent on the wet earth. As dawn broke, the villagers rose from their beds, surprised by how well they had slept. The air felt fresh, the world renewed. Children laughed as they splashed in puddles, parents smiled more easily, and even the lonely found comfort in the gentle patter of rain. No one spoke of the Rainkeeper, for few remembered her name. But in their hearts they carried a sense of peace, a quiet assurance that their worries were never too great to be washed away. And so, night after night, Elowyn continued her work. She gathered the burdens of her people, carried them through the rain, and offered them up to the sanctuary. The rain fell, the worries faded, and the village of Elderglen slept on safe serene, and watched over by the Rainkeeper's gentle gift. The sanctuary bell. The village of Mistvale was known for its endless rains and the ancient sanctuary that stood at its center. The sanctuary was a place of refuge, its stone walls wrapped in ivy, its roof echoing the steady rhythm of falling water. But what made the sanctuary truly special was the old bell that hung in its tower. A bell said to possess the power to wash away worries and bring peace to restless hearts. The bell was not rung for celebrations or warnings. Instead, it was reserved for nights when the rain fell hardest and the village's anxieties threatened to overflow. On such nights, the keeper of the sanctuary, an elderly man named Father Rowan, would climb the narrow spiral staircase to the bell tower. His steps were slow but steady, each one a promise of comfort to those below. On one particularly stormy night, the rain lashed the village with relentless force. Windows rattled and thunder rolled across the hills. Inside their homes, the villagers lay awake, troubled by worries both great and small. Children feared the storm, parents fretted over their crops, and the elderly remembered losses that still ached in their hearts. Sensing the heaviness in the air, Father Rowan donned his cloak and made his way to the sanctuary. He lit a lantern, its glow soft and steady, and began his ascent to the bell tower. The wind howled through the narrow windows, but the old man pressed on his heart full of purpose. At the top, he reached for the thick rope that hung beside the bell. He paused for a moment, closing his eyes and offering a silent prayer for the village. Then, with a gentle but firm pull, he set the bell in motion. The sound that followed was deep and resonant, rolling out over the rooftops and fields. It mingled with the rain weaving through the night like a comforting embrace. The villagers heard the bell's chime and felt its power, a vibration that seemed to reach into their very souls, loosening the knots of anxiety and fear. In one cottage, a mother rocked her crying child, the bell's tone soothing them both until the child's sobs faded into peaceful sleep. In another, a young man worried about his future felt his breath slow, his thoughts growing clearer with each toll. Even the oldest villagers, haunted by memories, found comfort in the bell's song, their hearts lightened by its ancient promise. As the bell rang, the rain seemed to soften its fury, giving way to a gentle patter. Father Rowan continued to ring the bell, each chime a reminder that no one in Mistvale was alone in their struggles. The sanctuary stood as a beacon of hope, and the bell's voice carried that hope into every corner of the village. When the final note faded, Father Rowan descended the tower, his work done for the night. He returned to the sanctuary's main hall, where candles flickered and the air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth. He sat by the window watching as the storm passed and the clouds began to part. By morning, the village awoke to a world washed clean. The air was crisp, the fields glistened, and the worries that had seemed so heavy the night before were lighter, if not gone. The villagers went about their day with renewed spirits, grateful for the sanctuary and the bell that watched over them. From that night on, whenever storms threatened to overwhelm Mistvale, the villagers knew that the sanctuary bell would ring out its song, a promise of peace and the gentle washing away of all anxieties. And so the tradition continued, the bell's chime echoing through generations, a sacred tale whispered by the rain itself, the candle, and the storm. The rain came suddenly, as it often did in the village of Silverbrook. One moment the evening sky was a tapestry of indigo and gold. The next, heavy clouds rolled in, swallowing the last light of day. Thunder rumbled distantly, and the first drops began to fall soft at first, then urgent drumming on rooftops and window panes. Inside a small cottage at the edge of the village, a child named Elsie pressed her nose to the glass, watching the world blur beyond the rain. She was 7 years old, with a curious mind and a heart that sometimes raced with worries she could not name. Tonight, her parents were away tending to a neighbor in need, and Elsie's grandmother was watching over her. The storm grew louder, wind rattling the shutters. Elsie's small hands trembled as she pulled the curtains closed. Shadows danced on the walls, and every flash of lightning made her flinch. She wished her parents were home. She wished the storm would pass. Her grandmother, sensing her unease, moved quietly around the kitchen. She was a gentle woman, her hair silver and her eyes kind, her presence a steady anchor in any storm. She gathered 2 candles from a drawer, their wax smooth and pale, and set them on the table. "Come, Elsie," she called softly. "Let's light a candle together." Elsie hesitated, then crossed the room, drawn by her grandmother's calm. She watched as the old woman struck a match and touched it to the wick. The flame sputtered, then caught, casting a warm glow over the table. "Why do we light a candle when it storms?" Elsie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her grandmother smiled, her face illuminated by the gentle light. "The candle is a promise," she said. "It reminds us that even in darkness there is always a little light. And when we share that light, it grows stronger." Elsie nodded, comforted by the ritual. She reached for the second candle and, with her grandmother's help, lit it from the first. The 2 flames flickered side by side, small but steadfast. They sat together in silence, listening to the rain. The storm raged outside, but inside the cottage the candlelight held the darkness at bay. Elsie's breathing slowed, her fears easing with each passing moment. Her grandmother began to tell a story, her voice weaving through the rhythm of the rain. It was a tale of another storm, long ago when she herself was a child. She spoke of how she had been afraid, how her own mother had lit a candle and told her that courage was like a flame, fragile at first, but growing stronger when tended with care. As the story unfolded, Elsie imagined the generations of women in her family, each lighting a candle in the darkness, each passing on the wisdom of hope and resilience. She felt a thread connecting her to the past, a gentle strength that steadied her heart. The thunder faded, the rain softened. Elsie's eyelids grew heavy, lulled by the warmth of the candles and the comfort of her grandmother's presence. She leaned against the old woman's shoulder, safe and loved. Before bed, her grandmother showed her how to cup her hands around the flame, protecting it from drafts. "This is how we care for our light," she said. "Not just with candles, but with kindness, with patience, with love." Elsie nodded, understanding in a way only children can. She blew out her candle, watching the smoke curl upward, carrying her worries away. Her grandmother kissed her forehead and tucked her into bed, the remaining candle glowing softly on the nightstand. As Elsie drifted into sleep, the storm passed, leaving the world washed clean. The candle's light lingered in her dreams, a beacon of hope that would guide her through any darkness. The next morning, Silverbrook glistened beneath a fresh sky. Puddles sparkled in the sunlight, and the air was sweet with the scent of rain-washed earth. Elsie awoke to birdsong and the soft clatter of her grandmother preparing breakfast. She padded into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The candle from the night before still sat on the table, its wick blackened but ready to burn again. "Did you sleep well?" her grandmother asked, pouring tea into delicate cups. Elsie nodded. "I dreamed of the candle. It was so bright it chased away all the shadows." Her grandmother smiled. "That is the candle's secret. Its light is not just for our eyes, but for our hearts." Elsie pondered this as she ate her breakfast. She wondered if the candle could help others too, her friends, who sometimes felt afraid, her parents when they worried about the farm, even the lonely old man who lived down the lane. After breakfast, she asked her grandmother, "Can we share the candle's light with others?" Of course, her grandmother replied. "Kindness is like a flame. When you share it, it never grows smaller. It only shines brighter. Inspired, Elsie decided to visit her neighbor, Mrs. Finch, who often sat alone by her window. She carried the candle carefully, shielding it from the breeze. When she arrived, she found Mrs. Finch looking out at the garden, her face lined with sadness. "Hello, Mrs. Finch," Elsie said shyly. "Would you like to light a candle with me?" The old woman's eyes softened and she nodded. Together, they lit the candle, its flame dancing between them. Elsie told her about the storm, about the story her grandmother had shared, and about how the candle's light had comforted her. As they talked, Mrs. Finch's smile returned, her loneliness eased by the warmth of companionship. When Elsie left, she promised to visit again, and Mrs. Finch promised to keep the candle burning in her window. Word spread through Silverbrook of Elsie's candle. Soon others began to light their own candles during storms, sharing stories and comfort with neighbors and friends. The village, once scattered and quiet, grew closer, bound together by small acts of kindness. Elsie learned that the candle's light was not just a shield against darkness, but a bridge between hearts. She carried this lesson with her, always lighting a candle whenever she felt afraid or alone, and teaching others to do the same. Seasons passed, and Elsie grew older. The village flourished, its people united by the simple ritual of lighting candles in times of trouble. But one autumn, a storm unlike any before swept through Silverbrook. The sky turned black at midday, and the wind howled like a wounded beast. Rain fell in torrents, flooding the fields and battering the cottages. Lightning split the sky and thunder shook the earth. Elsie, now a young woman, gathered with her family and neighbors in the sanctuary at the heart of the village. The old stone building was sturdy, its walls thick and comforting. Candles lined the windowsills, their flames trembling but unyielding. As the storm raged, fear crept into the hearts of the villagers. Some wept for their homes, others for loved ones caught in the tempest. Elsie felt the weight of their worry pressing down on her, threatening to snuff out her own courage. Her grandmother, frail but resolute, took Elsie's hand. "Now is the time to remember the candle's promise," she whispered. "Even the smallest light can guide us through the darkest night." Elsie nodded, drawing strength from her grandmother's words. She stood before the gathered villagers, her voice steady. "Let us light our candles together," she said. "Let us share our hopes, our fears, and our love. We are not alone. Our light is stronger when we stand together." One by one, the villagers lit their candles, passing the flame from hand to hand. The sanctuary filled with golden light, each flame a testament to resilience and unity. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, the darkness could not enter. They sang songs and told stories, their voices rising above the wind. Children clung to their parents, elders comforted the young, and strangers became friends. The candlelight flickered on their faces, illuminating hope in every eye. Through the long night, the villagers kept their vigil. The storm battered the sanctuary, but the walls held firm and the candles burned bright. When dawn finally broke, the rain ceased and the sun rose over a world transformed. Silverbrook had endured. Homes could be rebuilt, fields replanted. But the bonds forged in the sanctuary and the shared light of 1,000 candles would never be broken. Years passed, and Elsie grew into a wise woman much like her grandmother before her. She became the keeper of the candle's story, teaching new generations the importance of hope, kindness, and unity. Whenever storms threatened, the people of Silverbrook gathered in the sanctuary, lighting candles and sharing their burdens. The ritual became a tradition woven into the fabric of village life, Children learned to care for the flame, to shield it from the wind, and to pass it on to others. Elsie's own children and grandchildren grew up with the candle's promise. They learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to keep the light burning, even when the world seemed darkest. As she grew older, Elsie often sat by her window watching the rain fall, and the candles flicker in the homes of her neighbors. She knew that the true power of the candle was not in the wax or the flame, but in the hearts of those who tended it. One evening, as another storm approached, Elsie's granddaughter Lily came to her side. The child was anxious, her eyes wide with worry. Grandmother Lily asked, "Will you light a candle with me?" Elsie smiled, her heart full. "Of course, my dear. Let me tell you a story." And so the legacy continued. Through storms and sunshine, through sorrow and joy, the candle's light endured, a beacon of hope, a symbol of love, and a reminder that together the people of Silverbrook could weather any storm. Long after Elsie's time, the story of the candle and the storm lived on. Travelers passing through Silverbrook marveled at the village's warmth and unity. On stormy nights, the sanctuary's windows glowed with candlelight, a sign to all that hope could be found even in the darkest times. The children of Silverbrook grew up, knowing that no matter what troubles might come, they could always light a candle, share a story, and find comfort in the company of others. And so the candle's light was passed from hand to hand, from heart to heart, shining bright against the shadows forever, a promise that in the face of any storm no one need face the darkness alone. The rain-polished stone, in the heart of the old forest, where the trees grew thick and the air was always cool and damp, there was a sanctuary known only to those who truly sought peace. The sanctuary was not grand or ornate, but a simple structure of stone and wood, its walls softened by moss and time. At its center, beneath a skylight open to the sky, lay a single stone, smooth, oval, and shining with a luster that no ordinary rock could claim. The villagers called it the rain-polished stone. Few knew how the stone had come to rest there. Some whispered that it had fallen from the heavens in a storm so fierce that the earth itself had split to receive it. Others believed it had been carried by the river, shaped and smoothed by centuries of water, until it was left behind when the river changed its course. The truth was lost to time, but the stone's power was known to all. Who visited the sanctuary, it could absorb the weight of worries, washing them clean with every rainfall. Every evening, as dusk crept through the forest and the first drops of rain began to fall, people would come to the sanctuary. They arrived quietly, their footsteps muffled by the mossy path, their faces shadowed by the burdens they carried. Some came alone, seeking solitude. Others came in pairs or small groups, drawn together by shared troubles. Among the visitors was a young man named Theo. He had grown up in the village at the forest's edge, listening to his grandmother's stories of the rain-polished stone. She had told him that the stone was alive in its own way, that it listened to the hearts of those who touched it, and that it had the power to transform sorrow into peace. Theo had always believed her, but it was not until he lost his father to illness that he truly understood the sanctuary's importance. On the night after his father's funeral, Theo found himself walking the path to the sanctuary. The rain was gentle, a soft mist that clung to his skin and hair. The forest was quiet except for the steady drip of water from the leaves. When he reached the sanctuary, he was surprised to find it empty. The stone sat in the center of the room, gleaming in the dim light. Theo approached, his heart heavy with grief. He knelt beside the stone and placed his hands upon its cool surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, as the rain intensified and began to fall through the skylight, he felt a subtle warmth beneath his palms. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts flow memories of his father's laughter, the pain of his loss, the fire of facing the future alone. As he sat in silence, the warmth grew, and he imagined his sorrow seeping from his body into the stone. The rain fell harder, washing over the skylight and splattering onto the stone, creating a soft, rhythmic melody. Theo felt his breath slow, his heart steady. When he finally opened his eyes, he saw that the stone surface was glowing faintly, as if it had absorbed a piece of his pain and transformed it into light. He left the sanctuary that night feeling lighter, as though the rain had washed not only the world, but his soul as well. From that day forward, Theo visited the rain-polished stone whenever he felt overwhelmed. He was not alone. Over time, he came to know many of the other visitors, an elderly woman mourning her lost husband, a young mother worried for her sick child, a boy struggling with loneliness. Each brought their own burdens, and each left a little lighter. The stone became a silent witness to the village's joys and sorrows. It absorbed the weight of grief, fear, anger, and regret, and returned peace in their place. The villagers cared for the sanctuary, repairing its roof when storms battered it, sweeping the floor, and tending to the wildflowers that grew around its entrance. They understood that the sanctuary was not just a place, but a living bond between them, a reminder that no one needed to carry their burdens alone. One spring, a terrible storm swept through the forest. The wind howled, trees bent and broke, and the river flooded its banks. The sanctuary stood firm, but when the villagers came to check on it, they found the rain-polished stone had cracked down the middle. Panic spread through the village. What would they do without the stone's comfort? How could they face their troubles without its silent support? Theo was among the first to arrive. He knelt beside the stone, tracing the crack with trembling fingers. The surface was still smooth, still warm, but the break was unmistakable. As the villagers gathered, a hush fell over the sanctuary. No one spoke, each person lost in their own fears. Then an old woman, the same who had mourned her husband, stepped forward. She laid her hands on the stone and closed her eyes. "It is not the stone that gives us peace," she said softly. "It is what we share with it and with each other. The stone has always been a mirror for our hearts. Its strength is our strength." Her words spread through the crowd like sunlight breaking through clouds. One by one, the villagers approached the stone, touching it gently, whispering their thanks. They realized that the stone's crack was not a sign of weakness, but a testament to all it had carried for them. It had not broken. It had given of itself just as they had given to each other. From that day on, the villagers began a new tradition. When they came to the sanctuary, they brought small stones from their own gardens and placed them around the rain-polished stone. Each stone represented a burden shared, a sorrow eased, a hope renewed. Over time, the circle of stones grew, forming a mosaic of colors and shapes, a testament to the village's resilience and unity. Theo continued to visit the sanctuary, but now he came not only to unburden himself, but to listen to others, to offer comfort and companionship. He found that the act of sharing, of listening, of holding a hand, of simply being present was as powerful as the stone itself. Years passed, and the forest changed with the seasons. Children grew into adults, elders passed on, and new families arrived. The sanctuary remained, its walls weathered but strong, its circle of stones ever expanding. The rain-polished stone, though cracked, continued to shine, its surface smooth and luminous beneath the rain. One evening, as Theo sat beside the stone, a young girl entered the sanctuary. She was new to the village, her eyes wide with uncertainty. She hesitated at the entrance, clutching a small pebble in her hand. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Does the stone really take away your worries?" Theo smiled and beckoned her closer. "It helps," he said, "but more than that, it reminds us that we're not alone. Would you like to try?" The girl nodded and knelt beside the stone. She placed her pebble among the others, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. When she opened her eyes, she looked at Theo, her face brighter. "Thank you," she said. Theo nodded. "Anytime." As the rain fell gently through the skylight, the sanctuary filled with the quiet sound of hope. The rain-polished stone glowed softly, its crack a golden seam, a reminder that even what is broken can be beautiful, and that peace is found not in perfection, but in the courage to share our burdens and the kindness to help others carry theirs. The story of the rain-polished stone spread beyond the village. Travelers passing through the forest heard whispers of a sanctuary where worries could be washed away. Some scoffed at the idea, but others, drawn by curiosity or desperation, sought out the sanctuary. Each found what they needed, not magic, but the simple, profound power of community and compassion. The villagers welcomed newcomers, teaching them the tradition of the stones, sharing stories and laughter, and offering comfort in times of sorrow. The sanctuary became a place of gathering, of celebration and remembrance, of healing and hope. As the years rolled on, the rain-polished stone remained at the heart of the sanctuary, its surface worn smooth by countless hands, its crack shining ever brighter. The circle of stones grew a living record of the village's journey, a testament to the truth that peace is not the absence of trouble, but the presence of understanding, love, and shared strength. And so, beneath the endless rain and the sheltering trees, the sanctuary endured a haven for all who sought solace, a beacon of hope in a world that could be at times as wild and unpredictable as the storm itself. The dreaming window. In the heart of the Whisperwood, where the trees grew tall and the air was always tinged with the scent of moss and rain, it stood a sanctuary unlike any other. It was a place of solace and quiet, built from ancient stones and timber, its walls softened by climbing ivy and the gentle touch of time. At the very center of this sanctuary was a single window, large, round, and perfectly clear, facing the endless, rain-soaked forest. The villagers called it the Dreaming Window. The window was more than just a piece of glass set into a wall. It was a portal to peace, a silent companion to all who sought comfort within the sanctuary's embrace. On stormy nights, when anxiety crept like a shadow through the village, people would come to the sanctuary drawn by the promise of the dreaming window. They would sit quietly on the wide stone bench beneath it, gazing out into the rain, and let their worries blur and fade, just as the raindrops slid down the glass. Among the many who found comfort there was a boy named Rowan. He was small for his age, with dark hair that curled in the damp and eyes the color of the forest after rain. Rowan's mind was often a whirlwind of thoughts, fears about the future, memories of things gone wrong, worries for his family and friends. The world outside felt too big, too uncertain, and sometimes the weight of it all pressed down on him until he could barely breathe. Rowan's grandmother was the caretaker of the sanctuary. She had shown him the dreaming window when he was very young, telling him that it held the power to calm even the stormiest mind. When you look through the window, she'd said, let your eyes wander, let your thoughts drift. The rain will carry your worries away, and you'll find your dreams waiting on the other side. He remembered her words often, especially on nights when sleep was hard to find. On such a night, with thunder rolling in the distance and the wind rattling the shutters, Rowan slipped from his bed and made his way to the sanctuary. The path was slick with rain, but he knew every stone and root by heart. The sanctuary's door was never locked. It welcomed all who needed its peace. Inside, the air was cool and still, scented with lavender and old wood. The only sound was the steady patter of rain on the roof and the soft sigh of wind through the eaves. Rowan climbed onto the bench beneath the dreaming window and pressed his forehead to the cool glass. Outside, the forest was a blur of shadows and silver, the rain painting everything in shifting patterns of light and dark. He let his thoughts wander, just as his grandmother had taught him. He pictured his worries as tiny boats setting sail on the river of rain outside the window. Each worry about school, about friends, about things he could not control, became a boat drifting farther and farther away until it vanished into the mist. As he watched, the world beyond the window began to change. The rain softened the trees, swayed gently, and the darkness seemed less threatening. Rowan's breath slowed, his heart steadied. He felt as if he were floating, weightless and free, carried by the same current that bore his worries away. He did not know how long he sat there, lost in the rhythm of the rain and the comfort of the dreaming window. When he finally stirred, the storm had passed, leaving the forest washed clean and glistening in the pale light of dawn. Rowan slipped quietly back to his bed, his mind calm and his dreams gentle. In the days that followed, Rowan visited the sanctuary often. He found that the dreaming window was always there for him, a silent friend who asked nothing and gave everything. He watched the seasons change through its glass, the bright greens of spring, the golden blaze of autumn, the soft white hush of winter. Each time the rain brought new patterns, new dreams, new peace. Word of the dreaming window spread through the village. People came from near and far, seeking comfort in its quiet magic. Some brought their children, hoping to ease their fears. Others came alone, burdened by grief or regret. All found solace in the simple act of sitting, watching, and letting go. The sanctuary became a gathering place, not just for those in need, but for anyone who wished to share in the peace that the dreaming window offered. People left notes on the windowsill, words of hope, wishes for loved ones, thanks for the comfort they had found. The caretaker gathered these notes and kept them in a wooden box, a treasure trove of dreams and gratitude. As Rowan grew older, he learned to help his grandmother care for the sanctuary. He swept the floors, tended the garden, and polished the window until it shone. He listened to the stories of those who came seeking peace, offering a kind word or a listening ear. He understood that the true magic of the dreaming window was not just in the glass, but in the act of sharing burdens and finding comfort together. One evening, as a fierce storm battered the village, a young girl arrived at the sanctuary. She was soaked through, her eyes wide with fear. Rowan welcomed her inside, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and led her to the bench beneath the window. "Will it help?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It always does," Rowan replied, smiling gently. "Just watch the rain and let your worries drift away." The girl sat quietly, her gaze fixed on the shifting patterns outside. Rowan sat beside her, silent and steady. Gradually, her breathing slowed, her shoulders relaxed. When she finally looked at him, her eyes were brighter, her fear eased. "Thank you," she said softly. Rowan nodded. "You're welcome. Come back any time." The girl returned often, as did many others. The sanctuary became a place of healing and hope, its walls echoing with laughter and quiet conversation. The dreaming window watched over them all, a constant presence in a world that was always changing. As the years passed, Rowan's grandmother grew frail. One spring morning, she called him to her side and placed her hand on his. "The sanctuary is yours now, Rowan," she said, her voice gentle. "Take care of it, and it will take care of you." Rowan promised, and when his grandmother passed, he kept her memory alive in every corner of the sanctuary. He tended the garden with care, welcomed each visitor with kindness, and polished the dreaming window until it gleamed. He discovered that the window's magic was not just for those who gazed through it, but for those who cared for it as well. In caring for others, he found his own peace, his own dreams. One night, as Rowan sat alone beneath the dreaming window, he thought of all the people who had found comfort there. The children who had learned to let go of their fears, the adults who had found the courage to face their troubles, the elders who had remembered the joys of their youth. He realized that the sanctuary was more than a building, more than a window. It was a living tapestry of dreams and hope, woven from the lives of all who had passed through its doors. Outside, the rain fell softly, painting the world in silver and blue. Rowan closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He felt the presence of his grandmother, of all those who had come before, and knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The dreaming window remained at the heart of the sanctuary, its glass clear and bright, its magic undiminished by time. Through storms and sunshine, through sorrow and joy, it offered peace to all who sought it. And as long as there were those who needed comfort, the sanctuary would stand a beacon of hope in the rain-soaked heart of the Whisperwood. The keeper of night songs, in the village of Fern Hollow, nestled between rolling hills and ancient forests, the nights were often long and restless. The rain came frequently, sometimes as a gentle mist that caressed the windows, other times as a roaring storm that rattled the rooftops and sent shadows dancing across the walls. For many, sleep was elusive, their minds tangled with worries that grew louder in the darkness. Yet, for those who knew where to listen, there was a secret comfort woven into the fabric of every rainy night, a lullaby soft and persistent, sung by the keeper of the night songs. No one could say exactly when the keeper first appeared. Some claimed she was as old as the hills themselves, a spirit born from the first drop of rain that ever fell on Fern Hollow. Others whispered that she was once a villager, transformed by sorrow and hope into something more. The truth was lost to time, but her presence was felt whenever the rain fell after dusk. The keeper's home was said to be the Sanctuary of Silver Eaves, a humble stone cottage at the edge of the woods where the roof sloped low and the windows glimmered with candlelight. The sanctuary was open to all, its door never locked, its hearth always warm. It was a place where the troubled could find peace, where the anxious could find sleep, and where the lonely could find a song waiting for them in the night. On one such night, when the rain fell in silver sheets and the wind howled through the trees, a boy named Elliot found himself unable to sleep. His mind was a storm of its own worries about his family, fears of the future, memories of things he wished he could change. The harder he tried to rest, the more restless he became, until the walls of his room seemed to close in around him. Remembering the stories his grandmother used to tell, Elliot slipped quietly from his bed, wrapped himself in a blanket, and crept out into the rain. The village was hushed, the only sound the steady drumming of water on cobblestones. He followed the path that wound between the houses, past the old well and the ancient oak, until he reached the edge of the woods. There, the Sanctuary of Silver Eaves awaited, its windows glowing softly in the darkness. Elliot hesitated at the door uncertain. But as he stood there, he heard it the faintest trace of a melody drifting through the rain. It was not a song he knew, but it felt familiar, as if it had been written just for him. The notes were gentle, rising and falling, like the tide weaving through the night air and wrapping him in a sense of calm. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The sanctuary was simple but welcoming, filled with the scent of herbs and the warmth of the fire. At the far end of the room sat the keeper herself, her hair silver as moonlight, her eyes kind and deep. She held a harp in her lap, her fingers gliding over the strings with effortless grace. Without a word, she beckoned Elliot to sit beside her. He curled up on the rug, his blanket still wrapped around his shoulders, and listened as the keeper played. The song was unlike any he had ever heard, soft and slow, each note a gentle caress, each pause a space for his worries to slip away. As the music filled the room, Elliot felt his breath slow, his heart steady. The rain outside became a rhythm, a backdrop to the keeper's melody. For the first time in weeks, the storm inside him began to quiet. The keeper sang her voice low and soothing. She sang of rivers and forests of stars hidden behind clouds of hope that lingered even in the darkest night. She sang of dreams waiting just beyond the edge of sleep, of burdens shared and sorrows eased. Her words were simple, but they carried a weight that settled gently on Elliot's shoulders, pressing down just enough to remind him that he was not alone. As the song ended, the keeper smiled and set aside her harp. She poured Elliot a cup of warm tea, fragrant with chamomile and honey, and sat with him in comfortable silence. The rain continued to fall, but inside the sanctuary all was calm. Elliot finished his tea, his eyelids growing heavy. The keeper led him to a small cot by the fire, tucking him in with a soft quilt. She whispered a final lullaby, this one just for him, and watched as he drifted into peaceful sleep. When Elliot awoke, the rain had stopped and the first light of dawn was creeping through the windows. The keeper was gone, but her presence lingered in the hush of the sanctuary, in the warmth of the fire, in the echo of her song. Elliot felt rested, his worries lighter, his heart full of quiet hope. He returned home carrying the memory of the keeper's song with him. He told his family of the sanctuary, of the woman with silver hair and the harp that sang away his fears. Word spread through Fern Hollow, and soon others began to visit the sanctuary of Silver Eves on restless nights. Each visitor found the keeper waiting, her music tailored to their troubles. She sang for the anxious and the grieving, for the lonely and the afraid. Her songs were different for everyone, but they all carried the same promise that no one had to face the night alone, that peace could be found even in the midst of a storm. As the years passed, the legend of the keeper grew. Some said she was a spirit. Others believed she was simply a kind soul with a gift for music and compassion. It did not matter. What mattered was the comfort she brought, the sleep she restored, the hope she inspired. Children grew up with the keeper's lullabies in their hearts. Elders remembered her songs as they drifted into their final dreams. The sanctuary remained a beacon in the rain, its doors always open, its hearth always warm. Elliot grew older, but he never forgot the night he first heard the keeper's song. Whenever worry threatened to overwhelm him, he would close his eyes and listen for the melody that had soothed his soul. Sometimes, if he listened closely, he could hear it in the rain, the music of hope, the promise of peace, the gift of the keeper of night songs. And so, in Fern Hollow, the nights were never truly lonely, nor the storms truly frightening. For as long as the rain fell and the sanctuary stood, the keeper's songs would echo through the darkness, guiding all who listened toward gentle sleep and the quiet certainty that dawn would come again. The ritual of rainwater. In the quiet valley of Mistwood, where the mountains met the sky and the rivers sang their way through mossy stones, the rain was more than just weather. It was a blessing, a rhythm, and a memory. The people of Mistwood had lived for generations with the rain as their companion. They planted their crops by its calendar, built their homes to welcome its gentle patter, and told stories of how the rain had shaped their lives. But, above all, they cherished the nightly ritual of rainwater at the sanctuary, a tradition as old as the village itself. The sanctuary stood at the edge of the valley, half hidden by willow trees and wildflowers. Its roof was made of cedar shingles, darkened by countless storms, and its walls were built from river stones, each one placed by hand. At the center of the sanctuary was a wide, shallow basin carved from a single piece of granite, smooth and cool to the touch. Rainwater collected in the basin through a clever system of gutters and spouts, always fresh, always clear. Every evening, as dusk settled over Mistwood and the first stars blinked awake, the villagers would gather at the sanctuary. They came in silence, their faces lit by lanterns and the last golden rays of the sun. Old and young, rich and poor, they walked the path together, their worries and hopes mingling in the hush of twilight. Among them was a girl named Mira. She was 12 years old, with hair the color of wet earth and eyes that caught every glimmer of light. Mira's family had lived in Mistwood for as long as anyone could remember, and she had grown up with the stories and rituals of the valley. But lately, Mira had been troubled by worries she could not name. She felt them like pebbles in her pocket, small but growing heavier with each passing day. That evening, as the rain began to fall soft and steady like a lullaby, Mira walked with her mother to the sanctuary. The path was slick with water, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and rain. When they arrived, the sanctuary was already filling with villagers. Some stood quietly, eyes closed, listening to the rain. Others whispered to one another, their voices gentle and low. The keeper of the sanctuary. An old woman named Lyra stood by the basin. Her hair was silver, her back bent, but her eyes were bright as lantern flames. She welcomed each villager with a nod, her hands folded in front of her. When everyone had gathered, Lyra raised her voice, not loud, but clear enough to carry over the rain. Tonight, as every night we come to the water, we bring our burdens, our fears, our hopes. We wash them away and we begin anew. One by one, the villagers stepped forward. Each dipped their hands into the rainwater, letting it flow over their fingers and wrists. Some closed their eyes, whispering silent prayers. Others simply watched the water ripple their faces, softening as the coolness touched their skin. When it was Mira's turn, she hesitated. Her mother squeezed her shoulder. "Go on, love. Let the water help you." Mira stepped to the basin. The rainwater was cold and clear, reflecting the lantern light in shifting patterns. She cupped her hands and let the water run through her fingers. As she did, she imagined her worries, her fears about growing up, her sadness for her friend who had moved away, her confusion about the changes in her family flowing out of her and into the basin. She closed her eyes and breathed deeply. The sound of the rain filled her ears, steady and comforting. For a moment she felt weightless, as if the water had carried her worries far away, out into the night. When she opened her eyes, she saw Lyra watching her, a gentle smile on her lips. "Feel better?" the keeper asked. Mira nodded. She felt lighter, as if the pebbles in her pocket had melted away. After the ritual, the villagers lingered in the sanctuary, sharing stories and laughter. Some sang old songs, their voices blending with the rain. Others sat quietly content in the peace that followed the washing away of their burdens. As the night deepened, the villagers made their way home, lanterns bobbing along the path. Mira walked beside her mother, her heart calm and her mind clear. The rain continued to fall, but it no longer felt heavy. Instead, it was a gentle presence, a reminder that every worry could be washed away, every night a chance to begin again. The ritual of rainwater became even more important to Mira as she grew older. Whenever life felt overwhelming, when exams loomed, when friends quarreled, when her heart ached, she returned to the sanctuary. Sometimes she went alone, sometimes with others. Each time she dipped her hands into the basin, letting the water carry her troubles away. She learned that the ritual was not magic, but a practice, a way to pause, to breathe, to let go. It was a reminder that she was not alone, that her worries were shared by others, and that together the people of Mistwood could weather any storm. Years passed, and Mira became a young woman. She left the valley for a time, seeking adventure and learning in distant cities. But no matter where she went, she carried the memory of the sanctuary with her. The sound of rain on the roof, the cool touch of water, the warmth of community. When she returned to Mistwood, older and wiser, she found that the sanctuary had changed little. Lyra had grown frailer, her steps slower, but her spirit was undiminished. The villagers still gathered each night, still washed their hands in rainwater, still shared their burdens and hopes. Mira took her place among them, grateful for the constancy of the ritual. She watched as children dipped their hands into the basin, their faces alight with wonder. She listened to the stories of elders, their voices rich with memory. She felt the peace that came from letting go, from trusting in the rhythm of the rain. One evening, as the rain fell harder than usual, Lyra called Mira to her side. "You have always understood the water," the keeper said. "When I am gone, will you care for the sanctuary?" Mira nodded, her heart full. She knew the responsibility was great, but she also knew she was ready. She had learned that the true strength of the ritual was not in the water itself, but in the act of gathering, of sharing, of letting go. When Lyra passed, the villagers mourned her passing, but the sanctuary remained a place of comfort and renewal. Mira became the new keeper, guiding the ritual each night. She welcomed newcomers, taught the children, and listened to the worries of all who came. She discovered that the ritual was ever-changing, shaped by the needs of the people. Sometimes the villagers brought flowers to float in the basin, their colors bright against the water. Other times, they wrote their worries on slips of paper, dissolving them in the rainwater before letting them go. Each variation was a testament to the creativity and resilience of the community. Mira found joy in her role, but she also faced challenges. There were times when the worries brought to the sanctuary felt too heavy to bear, when illness swept through the valley, when crops failed, when hearts were broken. On those nights, Mira reminded herself that she was not alone. She drew strength from the rain, from the memories of Lyra, from the trust of the villagers. She learned to listen deeply, to hold space for sorrow as well as joy. She watched as the ritual brought comfort to those who needed it most, and she saw how the simple act of washing hands in rainwater could transform fear into hope, loneliness into connection. As the years went by, Mira grew older, her hair streaked with silver, her hands strong and gentle. She trained others to help with the ritual, ensuring that the sanctuary would always be a place of refuge. She watched as children she had once guided grew into adults, bringing their own children to the basin. The ritual of rainwater became a thread that bound the generations together, a living tradition that adapted and endured. It was a reminder that no matter how the world changed, the need for comfort and community remained. On the night of her 70th birthday, Mira stood at the basin surrounded by friends and family. The rain fell softly, a blessing on the roof. As she dipped her hands into the water, she felt the presence of all those who had come before her Lyra, her mother, the countless villagers who had found peace in the ritual. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of gratitude. She knew that the sanctuary would endure, that the ritual would continue, that the rain would always fall. She smiled, content in the knowledge that every worry could be washed away, every night a chance to begin again. And so, in the valley of Mistwood, the ritual of rainwater continued, a nightly act of hope and healing. The sanctuary stood as a beacon. In the rain, its basin always full, its doors always open. The people gathered, dipped their hands, and let their worries flow away, trusting in the gentle power of water, community, and the endless renewal of the rain. The Circle of Light. In the remote mountain village of Larkspur, the nights were long, and the rain was a constant companion. The clouds would gather in the late afternoon, their bellies heavy with promise, and by dusk the first drops would begin to fall, tapping out a gentle rhythm on the rooftops and cobblestones. For the villagers, the rain was both a blessing and a challenge, nourishing their fields, but also bringing with it a sense of isolation. Yet, in the heart of this solitude, the people of Larkspur had created a tradition that turned even the darkest, wettest nights into moments of warmth, unity, and peace, the Circle of Light. The tradition began generations ago, though no one could remember the exact origin. Some said it started during a year of terrible storms when the river threatened to flood the valley and fear gripped every heart. Others whispered it was the idea of a wandering monk who had once sought shelter in Larkspur and left behind the wisdom of gathering together. Whatever its beginnings, the Circle of Light had become the village's most cherished ritual. A sacred tale passed from parent to child, neighbor to neighbor, year after year. Whenever the rain fell hardest and the wind howled through the mountain passes, the villagers would make their way to the old stone hall at the center of town. The hall was simple but sturdy, built from granite quarried from the cliffs above, and roofed with cedar shingles that had weathered countless storms. Its doors were never locked, and its hearth was always ready to be lit. On these nights, each villager would bring a candle, some plain and white, others colored or scented, a few carved with intricate designs. Children carried their candles carefully, their faces glowing with anticipation. Elders walked slowly, leaning on canes, their candles flickering in the wind. Families arrived together, hands joined their burdens, lighter for being shared. Inside the hall, the villagers would gather in a great circle, each person holding their candle. The room would be dark at first, the only light coming from the embers in the hearth and the occasional flash of lightning through the high windows. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and the quiet murmur of voices. At the center of the circle stood the Keeper of the Light, a role passed down through the generations. The Keeper was not always the oldest or the wisest, but someone chosen for their kindness and calm. A person who could hold the hopes and worries of the village with gentle hands. On this night, the Keeper was a woman named Anwen, her hair streaked with silver, her eyes bright with compassion. Anwen would begin the ritual by lighting her own candle from the hearth, shielding the flame with her hand. She would hold it high, and the villagers would fall silent, their faces turned toward the gentle glow. Tonight, Anwen would say, her voice steady and clear, "We gather as one, we bring our worries, our sorrows, our hopes, and our dreams. We share our light so that no one need face the darkness alone. She would then walk to the person beside her, offering her candle's flame. That person would light their own candle, then pass the flame to the next, and so on, until the entire circle was aglow with hundreds of tiny flames. The room would fill with a golden warmth, the shadows chased into the corners, the storm outside forgotten for a time. As the candles burned, the villagers would close their eyes and make a silent wish for peace for themselves, for their loved ones, for the world beyond the mountains. Some would whisper prayers, others would simply breathe deeply, letting the light and the presence of their neighbors ease the tension in their hearts. On this particular night, the rain was heavier than any in recent memory. The wind rattled the shutters and the river roared in the distance. Yet, inside the hall, the circle of light held strong. Anwen looked around at the faces illuminated by the candlelight, old friends, new arrivals, children who had never known a world without this ritual. She saw worry and hope, fatigue and resilience, all woven together in the quiet strength of community. After a time, Anwen invited anyone who wished to speak to share a story or a thought. One by one, villagers stepped forward, some shy, some confident, all honest. A young mother spoke of her fears for her sick child, her voice trembling but her eyes steady. An old man recalled the first circle of light he had attended as a boy and how it had given him courage through the years. A teenager shared a poem about the rain, its verses full of longing and hope. Each story was met with nods, murmurs of understanding, sometimes tears, sometimes laughter. The act of sharing, of being heard, was as important as the light itself. It was a reminder that no burden was too heavy when carried together, no sorrow too deep to be eased by kindness. When everyone who wished to speak had done so, Anwen led the circle in a moment of silence. The only sounds were the rain and the soft crackle of the candles. In that silence, the villagers felt their hearts settle, their worries soften, their spirits lift. Finally, Anwen gave the signal, and together the villagers blew out their candles. The room was plunged into darkness for a heartbeat, then slowly filled with the glow of the hearth and the first light of dawn creeping through the windows. The smoke from the candles curled upward, mingling with the scent of rain and hope. The villagers lingered, reluctant to leave the warmth of the hall and the comfort of each other's company. They embraced, exchanged quiet words, and promised to help one another in the days to come. Children gathered the stubs of their candles, tucking them into pockets as talismans against future storms. As the sun rose and the rain eased, the villagers returned to their homes. The world outside was fresh and clean, the fields sparkling with droplets, the river running swift and clear. The troubles that had seemed so overwhelming the night before were lighter, now shared and soothed by the ritual of the circle of light. In the days that followed, the village thrived. Neighbors checked on one another, offering help where it was needed. Children played in the puddles, their laughter echoing through the streets. The elders sat in the sun, sharing stories and wisdom. The memory of the circle lingered in every heart, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest times there was always light to be found. The tradition endured year after year, storm after storm. New generations grew up knowing that when the rain fell hardest, they would gather in the old stone hall, candles in hand, ready to share their light. The circle of light became more than a ritual. It was the soul of Larkspur, a living promise that no one would ever be left alone in the dark. And so, through countless seasons, the village stood strong against the storms, bound together by the simple, powerful act of lighting a candle, making a wish for peace and trusting in the strength of community. The circle of light glowed on a beacon in the rain, guiding the people of Larkspur through every night toward every dawn. As the final echoes of rain fade into the gentle hush of night, the stories of the Night Rain Sanctuary legend draw to a close, leaving behind a tapestry woven from hope, healing, and the quiet strength of community. Each tale, whether it spoke of lantern light flickering in the storm, the wisdom of a willow's whisper, or the unity of a circle of candles, has carried us through the sacred ritual of anxiety washing and peaceful sleep training. These are not just stories of individuals seeking solace, but of a collective spirit, one that finds peace not in the absence of storms, but in the courage to weather them together. The sanctuary in all its forms stands as a symbol of the human journey through darkness and uncertainty. It is the place within and around us where burdens are shared and light is kindled. Through the lantern's glow, the polished stone, the dreaming window, and the keeper's song, we are reminded that anxiety is not a solitary battle. Rather, it is a universal experience, one that can be softened by compassion, ritual, and the gentle embrace of nature's rhythms. Rain, so often a metaphor for sorrow or struggle, becomes in these legends a source of renewal. It washes away the dust of worry, nourishes the seeds of hope, and connects every soul beneath its fall. The rituals, whether washing hands in rainwater, lighting a candle in the storm, or gathering in the circle of light, invite us to pause, to breathe, and to trust in the cyclical nature of life. Just as rain falls and passes, so too do our anxieties ebb and flow, never permanent, always changing. In the sanctuary's embrace, we learn the value of presence. The act of sitting quietly listening to the rain or sharing a story by candlelight becomes a meditation, a way to ground ourselves in the moment and release the burdens that weigh on our hearts. These moments of mindfulness, repeated night after night, become a form of gentle sleep training. They teach us that peace is not a distant goal, but a practice cultivated through small acts of kindness, gratitude, and self-care. The legends also speak to the power of connection. Each character, from Mira at the rainwater basin to Rowan at the dreaming window, finds strength not only in solitude, but in community. The sanctuary is never truly empty. It is filled with the memories, hopes, and dreams of all who have passed through its doors. In sharing our struggles and joys, we break the illusion of isolation and discover the comfort of belonging. For those who are curious about breaking free from cycles, whether of anxiety, suffering, or even the great wheel of spiritual rebirth, these stories offer a gentle guide. They suggest that liberation is not found in grand gestures or sudden awakenings, but in the quiet, persistent turning toward light. It is in the willingness to let go, to trust, in renewal, and to support one another on the path to peace. As you carry these tales into your own nights, may you find your own sanctuary, a place or practice that calms your mind and soothes your spirit. Let the sound of rain remind you that all things pass, and that each new dawn brings the promise of renewal. May you light your own lantern, wash your hands in the rain, or gather with loved ones in a circle of light, knowing that you are never alone in your journey. In the end, the Night Rain Sanctuary legend is not just a collection of bedtime stories. It is an invitation to live with intention, to honor the sacredness of rest, and to embrace the cycles of letting go and beginning again. Through ritual, community, and the gentle wisdom of nature, we find the courage to release our anxieties and welcome the peace that waits just beyond the storm.